Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today is day 31 in our 90-day SAT prep series. Today we'll be going through about 20 minutes in the math section and then about half an hour with the SAT reading section. So we're going to start with the math and then we'll switch over to the reading. So for the math section today, we're going to be working from SAT Practice Test 2. We're going to be going through problems 24 through 30, which are some of the harder problems in the SAT Math with Calculator section. And then we're going to switch over to the reading section where we'll go through a passage together. Alright, so with that, let's go ahead and get started with the math section. Keep in mind, I'll be giving you my tips, tricks, strategies, and advice as a 1590 SAT score. That's back-to-back 800s on the math section. So really trying to give you my insights into how I approach these questions to get to the correct answer the fastest, okay? Because there are different ways to solve math problems, and some of them are much, much faster and much, much more efficient, which is what I try to show you in these videos because the SAT math section is timed. So being able to do it very, very efficiently is very important. So with that, make sure you have a notebook out so that way anything that I say should go in your notes or anything that you find is a good strategy or very, very efficient, you can put down there to help you improve on the SAT. So with that, let's get started. We've got an equation above. We're told the equation of a circle and the xy plane is shown above. What's the radius of the circle? All right, so we know that our equation for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared, where our center is hk. Right? So the thing that I look at up here, since I see that I have an x term here and a minus 2y term there, right? What I know is I've seen this type of question before, right? And if you haven't, I'm about to teach you it, so pay attention. What I see is I don't have this in my form that I'm given down here, right? This is the normal form I'd be used to seeing a circle equation in. Okay, so if I see it in a form like this up here, where I don't have those parentheses, then what I know about my radius term is I'm going to actually have to find it, right? I have to find what that r squared term is. So in this case, I see I have x squared and then a plus 4x. So I'm actually going to have to find the factor there, right? So I'm going to have an x, obviously. We know that it's going to get squared because that's what we see in our equation down here, right? This equation I wrote right here. So the question is, how do I get to plus 4x? Well, that's going to be x plus 2, right? Because x plus 2 squared, if we're going to write this out, x plus 2 times x plus 2, we're going to have a plus 2x, and then we'll have plus 2x to give us plus 4x. Okay, so how does that help me solve for my radius? Well, now that I have that, I can solve for this part right here. This 2 has to get multiplied by that 2, which is going to give me a plus 4 over here. Now when I add 4 there, I got to add 4 to this negative 1 as well. So now I have that negative 1 plus 4. So now I'm going to do the same thing I just did with my x term with my y term. So I see I have minus 2y, which means I'm going to have y minus 1 squared, because y minus 1 times y minus 1 is going to give me a y squared, and then it's going to give me minus 2y, and then it's going to give me plus 1. So since I have plus 1 here, I also have to add 1 over here, okay? So I add 1 to each side. I see I have 4 plus 1, which is 5, and then I got negative 1 then plus 5. I see that gives me 4. Now keep in mind, 4 is not my correct answer because that's my radius squared. Okay, so 4 is equal to my radius squared. So I have to square root each side to solve for my radius, and I know my square root of 4 is 2, so my answer there is going to be A. Okay, so that's really one important thing to understand when you're dealing with radius of circle questions, is that that's going to equal that x squared. It doesn't equal the radius, it equals the x squared. I'm sorry, the radius squared. Okay, it equals the radius squared, which means that you have to take the square root to find the radius. So 24, answer there is going to be A. So the really big thing there is understanding that if you have it in this form up here that we're given to from our equation, that we got to look to find the factors and then use those factors then to add to each side in order to find what that radius is, or what that radius squared is, and then use the radius squared value to find the radius. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and switch over to question 25. We've got the graph of the linear function f has f-intercepts at a and 0 and o and b, or 0 and b in the xy plane. If a plus b equals 0 and a cannot equal b, which of the following is true about the slope of the graph f? All right, so one thing I look for whenever I'm given two points like this, right, and I have two missing variables, in this case a and b, is I'm going to look to create a slope formula. Okay, so in this case it says directly something about the slope. It won't always say something directly about the slope, but anytime I see that where I have two variables missing like this, I'm always going to think to use the slope formula. So that's just one thing you could put in your notes there. Okay, next thing, I have an if statement here. Notice how I underline that. Anytime I'm given an if statement, it's probably important to the math section, so I pay attention to that. Okay, also we have a cannot equal b. That's important as well. Okay, so if a plus b is going to equal 0, what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to have a equal either a negative or positive number, but whatever it is, B is going to have to equal the same absolute value but the opposite sign, right? So let's say that A was negative 3, then B would have to be positive 3, because negative 3 plus positive 3 gives us 0. Okay, and that's what we're told right here in this if statement. Okay, also, they can't equal each other. Okay, this right here, this works because one is negative 3 and one is positive 3. Okay, that works because they don't equal each other. Their absolute values can equal each other, but they themselves cannot equal each other. Okay, so with that, we can go ahead and set up our equation then. We'll go ahead and use those numbers, right? So we're going to have A, we said was, we could plug in the numbers or we can not. We'll end up plugging the numbers in eventually, but I'll actually just go ahead and show you how we're going to do it using A and B because that's the way that I kind of want you to learn it. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's say that we're coming up with our slope formula, right? We know our slope formula is going to have our second points. So we're going to pick this one to be our second points, right? So we're going to do our x number 2 and our y number 2 will be those, and then our x1 and our x and our y1 will be on this A and 0. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with up top, we're going to have our rise or our y value. So we're going to take y2, which is b, subtract y1, which is 0, set it over x2, which is 0, subtract x1, which is a, and that gives us our slope. Okay, we go ahead and simplify that. B minus 0 is b, 0 minus a is negative a, and we see our slope is b over negative a. Okay, so at this point, we can just go ahead and plug in our values that we just determined, right? We made up some numbers just to make it easier on us. So we plug in b, we know b is 3, all over negative 3. We know negative 3 makes a positive 3, which is 3 over 3, which means that's equal to 1, which is a positive. Okay, so we know answer there is going to be A. So one strategy you can use in things like that, where you have two variables like that, and your situation where you have to find a slope and then determine something about that slope, is use those if equations to determine artificially generated numbers. Okay, artificially generated numbers just means you made them up, right? So use that if statement. In this case, it was two if statements, to go ahead and create those artificially generated numbers and then plug them in down here in order to find what your slope will be, right? In this case, it's going to be positive. Okay, so that's one strategy that you can use and that I would use if I were doing this. So that's 25. 25 answer there is it's positive, which is A. Now we got 26. So I see I've got a graph here. I'm told the complete graph is shown in the xy plane. What is equal to 1? Okay, which of the following is equal to 1? Okay, well that's going to be whatever points intersect this one right here. Okay, I see that we got that at negative 4 right here. So negative 4 is going to be one value. And I see I have a list also, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so f of negative 4, yes, that does equal 1. So that's a check. That's a true statement. Next we have f of 3 over 2. That's 1.5. I know 1.5 is going to be right where this arrow is pointing on this graph right there. I see that does equal 1. So that's also correct. Next I have f of 3. I see that that also is intersecting my point of 1, right? That is equal to 1. That is also true. So answer there is 1, 2, and 3. That one right there is pretty easy. If you watched my video from yesterday, I talked about how SAT practice tests 2 and 4, they don't seem to get too much harder as you go on. That's kind of changed in my opinion with SAT practice tests 5 through 10, and that's more indicative of what the SAT will be. They will get more difficult than this as you get to these later questions in my opinion. Generally, if you look at practice tests 5 through 10, the questions right around 24 through 30 will be harder than what you're seeing on this one, for example. So that's just something to keep in mind. But either way, these are still good practice tests to use for teaching, just because it's material that you still are going to need to know and that could still show up. Just maybe not as late as this one is 26. I would expect this one to come more around 20 if I'm being honest, in my opinion, on a real SAT. I would expect this type of question with how easy it is to be somewhere right around 15 to 20. So, all right, now we've got question, looks like we're on 27 now. Let me just check. Yes, we are on 27. All right, so we've got an insulated and uninsulated or non-insulated. We got two different points. We got temperature y-axis, time x-axis. So two samples of water of equal mass are heated to 60 degrees Celsius. One sample is poured in an insulated container, other in a non-insulated container. Samples are left for 70 minutes to cool in a room having a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. Graph above shows temperature of each sample at 10-minute intervals. What correctly compares the average rates at which the temperatures of the two samples change? Okay, I'm going to go take a look at my graph, find what kind of rates I'm looking at for change. I see my non-insulated has a very, very large change at the beginning, okay, and also right here, another very, very large change. Okay, then I see its change really starts to level off to pretty much no change from right around 50 to 70. Okay, whereas my insulated container, we have pretty much steady change going down here, and really pretty much a steady change overall, whereas it's very, very drastic at first with the non-insulated, and then pretty much no change with the non-insulated after basically about 40 minutes. So I'm going to look for an answer choice that says that. Okay, I see A and B. They say in every 10-minute interval, the magnitude of the rate of change of temperature of the insulated is greater than that of the non-insulated. Okay, both of them are saying that the magnitude of rate of change of one is greater than the other, but that's not true because the rate of change of the non-insulated was greater at first, okay, but then it was less than the insulated at the end. So we need something that shows that difference over time. Okay, so let's look at option C. In the intervals from 0 to 10 minutes and 10 to 20, the rates of change of temperature of the insulated samples are of greater magnitude. Okay, that's incorrect. We know that in those first intervals, 0 to 10 and 10 to 20, the rates of change of the temperature of the non-insulated sample are of greater magnitude. Okay, and then in 40 to 50 and 50 to 60, the rates of change of temperature of the insulated sample is of greater magnitude. So D is going to have to be our correct answer for question 27 because it's correct according to the data in the graph. So D is our correct answer there. That's 27. All right, so as far as tips there, really the big thing is just understanding how to interpret your graph. Okay, one thing that you look at most of the time, if not all the time, whenever I have a graph question, you'll see me annotate it. That's something I highly recommend you do as well. With graphs, it can be very, very helpful if you annotate your graph. It can prevent you from making simple mistakes, whereas, for example, if you were trying to find an intercept of something and you just glanced over, like say you had to find where something equaled this 10 here, and you just glanced over and you accidentally looked up to the 20 line, you're going to make mistakes. You'll always see me drawing lines on my graph and annotating it. That's really something I recommend with graphing questions. All right, 28. So I've got a graph here. In the xy plane, ABCD is a square and point E is the center of the square. The coordinates of points C and E are 7, 2, and 1, 0 respectively. Which of the following is an equation of a line that passes through points B and D? All right, so an equation of a line that passes through points B and D. Okay, here's one thing I'm immediately knowing. I know this is a square, and I know my diagonals that cross like this form a 90-degree angle right here. Okay, they form 90 degrees angles all around. Okay, so I know my angle, or I'm sorry, my line B to D, it's going to be perpendicular to my line A to C because it's at a 90-degree angle, which means it's perpendicular. So I know that I can solve for my slope from A to C because I'm given my points C and E, which I can use to find the slope of this line. I can find the slope of it, which is M, we'll call it. So I'll find the slope of that line, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that slope and I'm going to find the opposite reciprocal of it, and that'll be my slope for my line from D to B. So that's what we're going to start doing. So we have E and C, right? That's this line right here. We see C is here, we see E is here. Let's find the slope there. What we're going to do is we're going to call this point here 7, 2. We're going to call that x2 and y2, and we'll call this point here x1 and y1. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. Now let's go ahead and write our slope equation. Okay, we know our slope. We're going to take our y2 up top because that's our rise over run. Y2 we know is 2. We subtract 0 because that's what y1 is. Now we take x2, which is 7, subtract x1, which is 1, and we're left with 2 over 6 then, okay, which is equal to 1 over 3. So I know my slope from my C to E is going to be 1/3, which means that the slope of my B to D line, right, my perpendicular line, it's going to be the opposite reciprocal. Opposite means we flip the sign, so since it was positive 1/3, we're going to flip it to a negative. Then we take this 3, flip it up, and we take this 1 and flip it down. Okay, so now we'll have 3 over 1, which we know is 3. Okay, so we'll have negative 3x, that's going to be our slope there. The next thing that I have to check, I'm going to check my answer choices, see if that gives me my correct answer right away. I see it gets rid of C and D, but we still have A versus B. Okay, they each have that negative 3x. Okay, so we're going to distribute that negative 3. I don't know if it's showing up on your screen right now. My screen's kind of going wonky. Okay, we're going to distribute that negative 3 over. Okay, so now we got to find where that y-intercept is. Okay, option A says it's at -1. Let's take a look. Well, look at when we drew this line. Okay, it's nowhere near that -1. We see it's at 3. Okay, so answer there is going to be 3. We go down, find an answer with 3. We see that -3 times -1 is going to give us positive 3. Okay, so answer there is going to be B, not A. B, not A. So B is our correct answer there. That's question 28. All right, now we've got question 29. So we've got a system of equations. We have A and B are constants. Which of the following values of A and B does the system have exactly 2 real solutions? All right, what I'm going to look to do here is I'm going to plug in this 3 that I have for y onto my underneath equation here. So I have 3 is equal to a squared plus b. Now at this point, I'm going to look to set this a to x squared term equal to the rest of my equation. So I'll have ax squared, and that's going to equal then that 3 minus b. I'll subtract b from each side to get rid of it over there. So then at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think logically, okay? So if I have a, and let's say that a is positive, okay? Well, we know x squared times x squared, it's always going to be positive, because if it's a negative squared, negative times a negative is going to be positive. If it's positive squared, that's also positive, okay? So this is going to be positive. Now let's say that a is positive. So we'll say if a is greater than 0, okay? So a is positive. Well, then we have a positive number equals 3 minus b, right? Now what if a is negative, okay? What if a is less than 0? Well, if a is negative, then x squared is still positive, so then that's going to have to equal a negative number, right? So then it's going to have to be 3 minus b. B would have to be, in that case, if a was less than 0, then we know b would have to be greater than 3, right? We would have to have 3 minus a number greater than 3, so b would have to be greater than 3, okay? And now if a is positive, right, in this case, then b has to be less than 3. B's got to be less than 3. So now that I've determined that criteria, I can just find which answer choice fits that. Okay, so let's look at our ones with a being greater than 0 first, just because there's really no reason I chose to do that. I just picked one, right? So let's say a is greater than 0. Is b greater than 3? Well, we see we have c, a is greater than 0. Is b less than 3? I'm sorry, I misspoke. Is b less than 3, right? That's what I had written down. Is b less than 3? No. We see b is greater than 3, so c is wrong. Option A, is b less than 3? No, it's equal to 3, so that's wrong as well. So now let's look at our other options where a is less than 0. I'm sorry, where a is less than 0, so a is negative. Is b greater than 3 in those? We see b is greater than 3 in option B, right? We have a is a negative, which is less than 0. That fits our criteria, and we see that b is equal to 4, which is greater than 3. So b would be our correct answer for 29 there. So right there, what we did is we found this ax squared term, right? And then we used logical reasoning, right? It being positive here, in order to create a system of criteria, right? A series of if statements. These are our if statements in order to break down our answer choices and find the correct answer. Okay, that's really the only way you can do that, and that's also the fastest way to do it. So that right there takes us through 29. That one right there is a little bit of a more difficult problem. There's not a whole lot that I see that are similar to that one. As far as on other practice tests, that's kind of a unique problem, but still, you could definitely see it on the SAT, so it's certainly important to know how to do it. Okay, that's definitely that one right there. That one is definitely worthy of a 29 spot. Okay, that one is certainly a bit more of a difficult problem. I would definitely consider that worthy of that 29 spot right next to that 30. 30 being usually the hardest problem in the SAT section for math. All right, now we've got 30. So like I said, this one's generally the hardest problem on the SAT math section. So with that, let's go ahead and get through it. So we got the figures showing a regular hexagon with sides of length A. So sides of length A. And a square with sides of length A. Okay, so we've got those side lengths A. If the area of the hexagon is 384, 384 times the square root of 3 square inches, what's the area in square inches of the square? Okay, we know this area in square inches of a square is its side squared, which we know is A squared in this case because each side is A. So we're going to have to solve for A in order to find that area of that square. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I have this hexagon here, which I'm going to split into 6 different triangles. Now each triangle is going to have the same side length because in a hexagon like this, right, we split that 360 degrees of this circle into 6 different pieces. Now when we do that, 360 over 6 gives us 60 degrees, so all of them are going to have 60 degrees right there. Now we have 2 identical side lengths here, 2 identical side lengths, which means that we're going to have identical side lengths down here, right? This length has, identical angles, okay? So the angle here has to equal the angle here, okay? Because that's an isosceles triangle with 2 that are the same, so those base angles have to be the same. So they're both going to have to split that 120 over 2, which means they're also going to have to be 60, okay? And in a triangle where all angles are 60 degrees, all sides are going to be the same. So we could go ahead and write that we have an A here and an A here as well. Okay, so at that point, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to determine the area of that triangle in order to solve for A then. Okay, so the area of that triangle is going to be the area of the hexagon over 6 because there are 6 triangles. So we take that 384 root 3 and we split it over 6. So I'll plug that into my calculator real quick to simplify. 384 root 3 over 6. We see that that's going to be 64 root 3, 64 root 3. Okay, so that's the area of a triangle. So I've got that as my area of a triangle. I know my area of a triangle is 1/2 my base times my height. I know my base is A, right? Base is A right there. So it's going to be 1/2 A. Now what is my height going to be? Well, we know that our height in a triangle, I'm going to draw one right here that's bigger so you can see it, is this right here. That's H. Okay, if I know I have a 60 here, I know I have a 30 up top because we're splitting that 60-degree angle into 2. That gives me a 30, 60, 90 triangle, which I can use to solve for the height. So I know down here, this side length is going to be 1/2 or a over 2, right? 1/2 of a, it's going to be a over 2. Well, I know then that this right here is going to be root 3 times whatever this length right here is, which in this case is a over 2. So it's going to be root 3 times a over 2, which is going to give me root 3, a root 3 over 2. Okay, so that's my height then. That is my height. Okay, so I take that height then, that a root 3 over 2, and I put that right here, times a root 3 over 2. Okay, so now I've got half a squared square root 3 over 2, because we had half a and then times a root 3 over 2, so that's going to be half a squared root 3 over 2. All right, so now what can I do? I can take this half here, I can simplify that by splitting it over 2. Okay, half over 2 gives me a quarter, so 1/4 then a squared root 3. Okay, 1/4 a squared root 3. That's a 4, not a 9. Okay, now I know that that's got to equal that 64 root 3. So I'll go ahead and multiply each side by 4 to get rid of this 1/4. Okay, so now we got 4 times 64 root 3. Next, I'll divide each side by the square root of 3, get rid of it here, get rid of it right here. Now I have a squared equals 4 times 64. Now, do I have to solve for a? Answer, no, I do not. Why? Because I'm asked for the area. Okay, I'm asked for the area of that square, which I know is a squared. So I don't even have to solve for a here. I just solve for a squared, which in this case is 4 times 64, which will give me 256. So my answer there is going to be answer choice A. Okay, so what can you learn from this? Well, for one, know when to stop. Okay, it's important to know when to stop when doing the SAT math section, because if you move on and you keep doing things and you solve for A, you're wasting time, and we don't want to waste time. So know when to stop. That's important. Okay, notice how I stated up top I wanted to solve for a squared. As soon as I got it, I stopped. I didn't solve for a. I only solved for what I needed to solve for. So that's a big thing with the SAT math section. There are some people who keep on solving even when they don't need to, and that's a waste of time, a waste of energy, and it's not efficient. So we don't do that. We stop when we need to stop. Okay, so we stop at a squared. 4 times 64 gives us 256. Okay, other than that, it was understanding geometry. So understanding you're going to have a 60-degree angle on your interior because 360 over 6 gives us 60 degrees. Then understanding we had equal side lengths, right here and right here. So we had to split that 120 degrees left in that triangle over 2, which gave us an equilateral triangle, meaning all sides are the same, which means every side was going to be that A. Okay, and then once we knew every side was A, it was applying that the area of a triangle is half the base times the height, then understanding that that base was that a over 2, and that height then, using that 60, 30, 90 triangle, was going to be a root 3 over 2. Then after that, we plugged it in and solved. Okay, so that one right there, it can be a bit overwhelming at first seeing all of this geometry, but once you really break it down, it's actually not too terrible of a problem. Okay, I would actually, I don't know if I'd say 29 was more difficult than it, but I'd say it's probably on an equal level to 30. So I wouldn't say it's too terrible once you really get the geometry down. So that takes us through our math section for today. With that, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our reading section. All right, so for the reading section today, we'll be spending about 25 minutes going through passage 1 from SAT Practice Test 6. So this is going to be a literature passage. Now, if you're following our program, you probably just took SAT Practice Test 6 a little while ago. So this will kind of help you see, after having taken that yourself, see the differences and similarities in how you went through the passage and how I go through the passage and go through the questions. So you can kind of see if you're mimicking what I do, or things that you do that you think I do better that you want to adopt, or anything like that. So you can kind of compare how you approach the passage to how I did, and kind of gain some insight from that. So that's really why I chose to do passage 1 from Practice Test 6 today. So we're going to do a couple of passages from Practice Test 6 over the next couple of days. That way you can kind of compare how you're going through the reading section with how I would do it, and just kind of see if there's anything you want to adopt as far as my strategies. If there's anything you're confused upon, this will kind of help clarify that as well. All right, so with that, we're going to get started. So like I said, we're still going to be going a bit slower, right? Still taking about 25 minutes per passage, because I'm still trying to teach you my strategies and accuracy, focus on accuracy rather than pacing at this point. So once again, we'll be spending a little bit more time going through it. So as I go through my initial read through, as always, I'll be highlighting things that I would underline if I were taking it paper pencil. Then after that, I'll go back through, tell you why I highlighted those things. Then after that, we'll go into the questions. I'll identify question types, identify why correct answers are correct, why incorrect answers are wrong, different strategies you can use to help you get to the right answer and avoid getting stuck between two, and things like that. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we got questions 1 through 10 are based on the following passage. The passage is adopted from Danielle Menuenden, Nawabdin, electrician, copyright 2009 by Daniel Menuenden. Another man might have thrown up his hands, but not Nawabdin. His 12 daughters acted as a spur to his genius, and he looked with satisfaction in the mirror each morning at the face of a warrior going out to do battle. Nawab, of course, knew that he must proliferate his sources of income. The salary he received from K.K. Hirani for tending the tube wells would not even begin to suffice. He set up a little one-room flour mill run off a condemned electric motor condemned by him. He tried his hand at fish farming in a little pond at the edge of the master's fields. He brought broken radios, fixed them, and resold them. He did not demur even when asked to fix watches, though that enterprise did spectacularly badly and in fact earned him more kicks than kudos, for no watch he took ever kept time again. K.K. Hirani rarely went to his farms, but lived mostly in Lahore. Whenever the old man visited, Nawab would place him night and day at the door leading from the servants' sitting area into the walled grove of ancient banyan trees where the old farmhouse stood. Grizzled, his peculiar aviator sunglasses bent and smudged, Nawab tended the household machinery, the air conditioners, water heaters, refrigerators, and water pumps like an engineer tending the boilers on a foundering steam in an Atlantic gale. By his superhuman efforts, he almost managed to maintain K.K. Hirani in the same mechanical cocoon, cooled and bathed, lighted and fed, that the landowner enjoyed in Lahore. Hirani, of course, became familiar with this ubiquitous man, who not only accompanied him on his tours of inspection, but morning and night could be found standing on the master bed, weary wiring the light fixture, or in the bathroom poking at the water heater. Finally, one evening at tea time, gauging the psychological moment, Nawab asked if he might say a word. The landowner, who was cheerfully filing his nails in front of a crackling rosewood fire, told him to go ahead. Sir, as you know, your lands stretch from here to the Indus, and on these lands are fully 17 tube wells, and to tend to these 17 tube wells there is but one man, me, your servant. In your service I have earned these gray hairs. Here he bowed his head to show the gray, and now I cannot fulfill my duties as I should. Enough, sir, I beg you, forgive me my weakness. Better a darkened house and proud hunger within than disgrace in the light of day. Release me, I ask you, I beg you. The old man, well accustomed to these sorts of speeches, though not usually this florid, filed away at his nails and waited for the breeze to stop. What's the matter, Nawabdin? Matter, sir? Oh, what could be the matter in your service? I've eaten your salt for all my years, but, sir, on the bicycle now, with my old legs, and with the many injuries I've received when heavy machinery fell on me, I cannot any longer bicycle about like a bridegroom from farm to farm, as I could when I had first begun the good fortune to enter your employment. I beg you, sir, let me go. And what's the solution? Asked Hirani, seeing that they had come to a crux. He didn't particularly care one way or the other, except that it touched on his comfort, a matter of great interest to him. Well, sir, if I had a motorcycle, then I could somehow limp along, at least until I trained up some younger man. The crops that year had been good. Hirani felt expansive in front of the fire, so much to the disgust of the farm managers. Nawab received a brand new motorcycle, a Honda 70. He even managed to extract an allowance for gasoline. The motorcycle increased his status, gave him weight, so that people began calling him uncle, and asking his opinion on world affairs about which he knew absolutely nothing. He could now range further, doing a much wider business. Best of all, he could spend every night with his wife, who had begged to live not on the farm but near her family in Firoza, where also they could educate at least the two eldest daughters. A long straight road ran from the canal headworks near Firoza all the way to the Indus, through the heart of the K.K. Hirani lands. Nawab would fly down this road on his new machine with bags and clothes hanging from every knob and brace, that the bike, when he hit a bump, seemed to be flapping numerous vestigial wings, and with his grinning face he rolled up whichever tube well needed servicing. With his ears almost blown off, he shone with the speed of his arrival. Alright, so now that we've read through, we can go ahead and get into why I highlighted the things that I did. So keep in mind, on the SAT you can't use a highlighter, so you'd be underlining these things with your pencil. Alright, Alright, so let's go ahead and switch to a pen, and then I can tell you why I highlighted these things. Alright, so the first thing, as always, whenever we have this little intro part right here, I'm always going to highlight or underline my author, my title, and the year it was written, or the copyright, right? So if I'm not told the year it was written, then I'm pretty much going to assume that my copyright year is when it was written. Alright, then the next thing I highlighted was Nawab, of course, knew that he must proliferate his sources of revenue. Okay, so we talked about how he had 6 daughters and how he's not making enough just from his job with K.K. Hirani, and that he needs other sources of revenues. So that's really highlighting his why, right? Why is he going to go through and do all of these different tasks right here, right? What's his purpose in trying to earn more money? Well, he needs to proliferate his sources of income. That's why he's doing it, okay? So that's really a big part of the passage there, is him trying to earn more money. Okay, the next thing. We have Nawab tended the household machinery, the air conditioners, water heaters, refrigerators, and water pumps, like an engineer tending the boilers of a foundering steamer in an Atlantic gale. And then we have by his superhuman efforts. This is really describing how hard Nawab works, right? How hard he works. So Nawab's hard work, and his dedication, right? So this is really giving us insight into the character. So one thing I do with literature sections, which are usually the first section on any SAT reading section, is with the literature sections, I always want to highlight things that give me insight into the character. Okay, so anything that gives me insight into the character as to why he does things or anything like that, I'm going to want to make sure I highlight. So in this case, it's saying that he's doing these things and tending to boilers, or doing things that's very, very hard work, like tending to boilers on a foundering steamer, and how he's giving superhuman effort. That gives me insight into his character and shows how hardworking he is. So because that's character insight, that's why I highlighted it, because it gave me insight into his character. All right, next we have, in your service I have earned these gray hairs. Okay, why did I highlight this? I highlighted this because this shows his loyalty and dedication to his employer, which really highlights the character insight as well, right? It's giving me more character insight because it's showing me how Nawab has been very, very loyal and dedicated to his employer for many years. Okay, now we see that he can't fulfill his duties. Once again, that's offering more and more character insight, right? He can't do it anymore because he's old. So also giving me insight into the character, so I'm going to want to highlight that. Next I have, I beg you, forgive me my weakness. Okay, so he's saying I'm weak now, also giving me character insight. He's weak, but he wishes he wasn't, but he also acknowledges because he's old, he can't do the things he could do when he was young. So once again, more character insight there. Okay, and then this part right here is really important. Release me, I ask you, I beg you. Okay, this isn't necessarily character insight. What this is really doing is showing us what the direction of this passage is going to take going forward. So because this is a big transition point in my passage, I'm going to want to highlight it. That way I know that it kind of separates us, giving us context about Nawab now to what he's really, what the story is really about, right? Which is him asking to be let go, and then after asking to be let go, ending up being brought back on with the aid of that motorcycle. So this is really an important transition point in the text. It really shows us why Nawab is talking to his employer. So this is a very, very important transition point. Anytime I have an important transition point, I'm going to want to highlight it or underline it. Okay, next I have, with my old legs, the many injuries I've received when heavy machinery fell on me, I can't bicycle about any longer like a bridegroom from farm to farm. Basically saying he's old now, he can't do things he could do when he was younger. So this is kind of giving character insight, but it's also not only giving me character insight, but it's showing me why Nawab needs to stop working, right? Or at least get a bicycle, right? Or get a motorcycle, I mean. Okay, so it's really showing me how he's gotten really old, and this would be good evidence for why he needs that motorcycle. Okay, so this is showing me he's really old. He can't do the things he could do when he was younger. That's why he wants to quit. So this is really answering my why question. Why does Nawab want to quit? Well, he wants to quit because he can't do it anymore physically because he's gotten older. So that's answering a why there. It's kind of character insight, but a little bit less because we've already kind of revealed that he's gotten older. So I wouldn't highlight it if it were just that character insight because we've already seen that he's gotten old, but because it tells us why that getting old is stopping him from doing his job now, that's really why it is important, right? So it does provide character insight, but we've already gotten that insight, so the fact that it answers that why behind it is why it's important. Okay, next, he didn't particularly care one way or the other. Keep in mind this is Haruni. Haruni doesn't particularly care one way or the other, except it touched on his comfort, a matter of great interest to him. Okay, this is character insight for Haruni, okay? Not Nawab, but character insight for Haruni. We see that Haruni doesn't really care about whether or not Nawab quits, except that it touches on his comfort, which is a matter of great interest to him. So this is showing Haruni's pretty selfish and doesn't really care too much about his employees except for the impact it has on him. So that provided really good character insight into Haruni there. That's why I highlighted that. Next, I have much to the disgust of the farm managers. Okay, so this is showing that they are envious. So this is giving me insight into how they feel about this. This would be character insight into the farm managers. They are kind of disgusted or envious of, or they're just really disgusted with the fact that Nawab is getting a Honda 70 and they're not really. So they're not too happy about that. So that's really what that is about, giving us character insight into how the farm managers react to this. Okay, the motorcycle increasing his status, giving him weight, so people began calling him uncle. That's really showing us a cause and effect relationship between the motorcycle. And anytime I have a cause and effect relationship, I'm going to want to highlight that as well. So anytime I see cause and effect, that's going to be important. So I always want to highlight that. All right, best of all, now he could spend every night with his wife. Okay, anytime I see something that indicates an exception or something that is the best or something that is the most prominent, I always want to pay attention to that. So anything that said something like not only, or not only, only one, so only one or best of all, anything that's telling me that there's one thing that's at the top or at the bottom, I always want to pay attention to that. So in this case, it was best of all, so that told me this was going to be important. He could spend every night with his wife. Okay, next we've got his grinning face. So this was really just showing me that he was happy at that point now that he had that motorcycle and didn't have to go through that physical toiling. So that really showed me the end all be all of this passage, which is that Nawab is now happy with this motorcycle and his life is improved. Alright, so this one right here, I guess I would just call this kind of summing up the ending for the literature section. Literature sections don't necessarily have conclusions in the same sense that history and science passages do. So this one kind of summing up Nawab's ending, right? His ending is now he's happy because he's gotten that motorcycle he needed. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get into our questions. So we've got the main purpose of the first paragraph. Okay, anytime I'm asked for the purpose, it's going to be pretty much a purpose question. Now in this case, it's pretty much the purpose of a little detail, right? It's not a super little detail because it's a whole paragraph, but it is the purpose of a detail, not the purpose of the passage as a whole. It's the purpose of a particular part of the passage, so we're going to call that the purpose of a little detail, even though it's a little bit more of a mid-sized detail because it's so big being one full paragraph. But it's really mainly the main part that I'd focus on for the question type here is it being a purpose question. So what's the purpose of that first paragraph? Well, we know that when we go to that first paragraph, pretty much most of what we talk about is all of Nawab's attempts to proliferate his sources of income, right? We talk about him being fixing watches, him starting a fish farming, him running a flour mill. So really all of it's pretty much, except for this part right here, except for this here, is describing ways that he's trying to improve his income. Okay, so that's really the main focus of that first paragraph. Okay, so the purpose of it is going to be C, to describe Nawab's various money-making ventures, because we describe all of them. There were more than 3. There were so many, it took up most of that paragraph. Okay, A right here, characterizing Nawab as a loving father. We never really determine whether or not he's loving. We know that he provides for his family and takes that very seriously, but we'd be focusing too much on lines 1 through 4 if we were to say A is the correct answer. So that would be too narrow. Okay, so that's too narrow of an answer choice, because that would be focusing too much in on lines 1 through 3 or 1 through 4. And then B, outlining the schedule of a typical day. We don't outline the schedule of a typical day. We're just listing his various money-making ventures, so B is incorrect. D, contrasting Nawab and Hironi's lifestyle. We don't contrast Nawab's to Hironi's lifestyle. We just talk about Nawab's money-making ventures there, so D is incorrect. All right, 2, as used in line 16, Kicks most nearly means. Anytime we have a most nearly means question, we know it's a words in context question. So really evaluating our ability to interpret what a word means in the context of the passage. In this case, it's kicks. So anytime we have a words in context question, what I do is I find the line that it's referring to. I read what word it is, then I go find it, and I come up with my own answer choice first, because by doing that, it helps me to avoid getting stuck between two, and it really helps me make sure I'm paying attention to context more instead of synonyms. So we got line 16, kicks. So we've got, he did not demur even when asked to fix watches, though that enterprise did spectacularly badly, so it means he wasn't good at it, and in fact earned him more kicks than kudos. Okay, in this case, kicks is contrasting kudos. We know kudos would be compliments, so kicks then would be something like complaints, right? Negative reviews, which are complaints. So we're really looking for the word complaints to mean kicks there, and we see we do have that, right? Kicks in this case doesn't mean thrills or jolts, okay? Those would be things if you were really just trying to list synonyms, and interest is way off topic as well. So answer there is going to be B. All right, the author uses the image of an engineer at sea in lines 23 to 28 to do what? Well, anytime that I'm given lines, right, that I'm asked to refer to, so in that case, I'll go ahead and answer the question type on that as well. This one right here, it's pretty much a purpose little detail question like one was, right? Because in this case, we're asked why is the author including this, so what is his purpose in including this? What is his purpose in including this little detail, lines 23 to 28? So purpose and including little detail. Okay, so anytime I'm given lines to refer to in my question to find the purpose of it, I'm always going to go back to those lines, see what they are, and then come up with my own answer. Okay, so why is the author including lines 23 to 28? Well, let's take a look. So 23 is going to be that last sentence down here. So we have grizzled, his peculiar, aviator, glasses, bent and smudged. Nawab tended the household machinery, the air conditioners, water heaters, refrigerators, and water pumps like an engineer tending the boilers on a foundering steam in an Atlantic gale. Okay, that's really showing us that if we were to think about an engineer tending the boilers of a steamer in an Atlantic gale, that boilers, okay, that's in a boiler room, and those boiler rooms are really, really hot. And an engineer tending to those, that's going to be really, really tough work because it's going to be like 100 degrees or higher in that boiler room. And that's really, really tough, just like Nawab tending all this machinery is very, very tough work. Okay, so that's really showing us the difficulty of that work. Okay, so let's look at our options for number 3 here. So we've got A, suggesting Nawab often dreams of having a more exciting profession. No, that was just showing us how hard his work was. B, highlighting the fact Nawab's primary job is to tend to Haruni's tube wells. No, it's not indicating his primary job being that because we actually talk about other jobs as well. C, reinforcing the idea Nawab has had many different occupations in his life. No, it's still one occupation. Okay, it's still one occupation. It just involves many different tasks. So C is incorrect as well because he had that occupation working for Haruni for pretty much all his life. And it's not multiple occupations, just multiple tasks within that one occupation. D, emphasizing how demanding his work for Haruni is. Yes, right, we're comparing it to that engineer at C, that boiler room, which we know is going to be very, very hot and difficult work, just like how demanding his work for Haruni is. So D would be our answer for 3. All right, 4, which choice best supports the claim that Nawab performs his duties for Haruni well? Okay, this is just an evidence question. Anytime we're asked just to provide lines that support a claim, that's an evidence question. In this case, we don't have to come up with our own claim and question before we're given it. So the claim Nawab performs his duties for Haruni well. Well, that's really going to be where we talk about how Haruni's life in this city that he's in that's tended by Nawab is just as good as it is in the city. So I believe that that is, let's see, I think that that's right here, okay, where we talk about that same mechanical cocoon. So that's going to be from right here, by his superhuman efforts. So I'm going to erase this real quick so you can see it better. Right here, by his superhuman efforts, he almost managed to maintain KK Haruni in the same mechanical cocoon, cooled and bathed, lighted and fed, that the landowner enjoyed in Lahore. We know Lahore was that city that he lives in most of the time, and he only comes to the country a little bit, but by his superhuman efforts, right, by Nawab's superhuman efforts, he's able to keep him in that same mechanical cocoon. So that's really, really a great piece of evidence there supporting why his work is so good, right? So that's 28 to 32. So that shows us why his work is so good. Okay, that's him performing his duties for Haruni very, very well. Okay, it shows that he's able to keep him in the same mechanical cocoon that he lives in when he lives in the city. So 4 there is going to have to be A. All right, question 5. So we've got in the context of the conversation between Nawab and Haruni, Nawab's comments in lines 43 to 52 mainly serve to do what? Okay, once again, we're asked about a little detail and what its purpose is. This is another little detail purpose question, okay? What is the purpose of Nawab saying these lines 43 to 52? Okay, so that's a little detail of the passage, and we're asked for the purpose of it. What is it serving to do? So let's go take a look. So we got 43 to 52. We have, sir, as you know, your lands stretch from here to the Indies. On these lands are 17 tube wells. I'm the only one who tends to these. In your service, I've earned these gray hairs, showing he's worked there for a long time, and he's been very, very loyal. He says he can't fulfill his duties anymore, and he's asking to be released. Okay, so that's showing how dedicated he is to Haruni, how long he's worked there, earning those gray hairs, really highlighting his loyalty and dedication there. So let's look at 5. We got A, flatter Haruni by mentioning how vast his lands are. No, he's not looking to flatter him. B, boast to Haruni about how competent and reliable he is. No, he's not looking to show how competent he is or reliable, because he's actually saying at this point in his lifetime he's not really reliable anymore due to his physical limitations. C, emphasizing Nawab's diligence and loyalty to Haruni. Yes, absolutely. Right, we're talking about how he's been there so long that he has gray hairs, which shows loyalty and his diligence. And he's saying at this point he doesn't think that he can do his duties as he was able to do them before, and therefore he thinks he should be released. Okay, so 5, the answer there is going to be C. D, notify Haruni that Nawab intends to quit his job tending the tube wells. He's not saying he intends to quit. He's asking permission to quit. Okay, so he's not going to quit no matter what. He's asking permission to. So D would be incorrect there. All right, part 6, or as far as, okay, I already got it there. All right, question 6. Nawab uses the word bridegroom, line 62, mainly to emphasize he's no longer what? Okay, this one right here is most definitely a little detailed question, but it's also a word and context question, right? Actually, it's not a little detailed question. I take that back. This is a word and context question. Word and context question. Okay, so even though it's not most nearly means, it's a word and context question because we're asked what the word bridegroom is really emphasizing, right? So that's really our ability to interpret this word bridegroom in context. It's not a little detailed question. I apologize for that. It is a words and context question, 100%. Okay, so the word bridegroom, line 62, is emphasizing Nawab is no longer what? So as always, we're referring to a line, so we go find that line. We got bridegroom right here. I'm going to erase this so you can see it better. So we have, I cannot any longer bicycle about like a bridegroom from farm to farm. Okay, he's saying he can't bike around from farm to farm, so biking long distances like a bridegroom. Okay, bridegrooms generally marry at young ages, right? People get married right around their 20s or 30s. So that's much, much younger. So him saying that he can't bike around like a bridegroom is saying he's no longer young. Okay, so it's talking about his age. Okay, so we see that he's no longer young. So that's answer choice D for number 6. Okay, it's not saying in love or naive or busy. Those would all be things if you weren't to go look in context and you just tried to come up with synonyms for bridegroom or try to touch on bride as some part of that. Okay, so that's the problem if you don't go and look at the context. That's the key part of this. It's a words and context question. We need to know the context behind the word. So 6 there has to be D, and now we can go ahead and move on to question 7. Okay, it can be reasonably inferred from the passage that Haroni provides Nawab with a motorcycle mainly because what? Okay, this is an inference question. Anytime we see the word infer, we know it's going to be an inference question. All right, so we're inferring why Harani provides Nawab with a motorcycle. Well, we know that Harani really only makes decisions if they benefit him. He's pretty selfish in that way. He doesn't really see things from Nawab's perspective. He's more interested in maintaining his comfort. So if we have evidence after that, it's probably going to be the lines where we talk about him wanting to maintain that comfort and how that's all that he cares about. So he gives him a motorcycle mainly because we're going to look for an answer that talks about him wanting that selfish benefit and that comfort. So we have option A, Haroni appreciates Nawab has to work hard to support his family. No, he doesn't care about his family. He just cares about his own comfort. B, Haroni sees benefit to himself. Yes, he's selfish. He wants to see that benefit, that comfort to himself from giving Nawab a motorcycle. So that's definitely our answer there. So 7 is going to have to be B. As far as C and D, Nawab's speech is the most eloquent he's ever heard. It doesn't say that, and that wouldn't be a reason why Haroni would give him that motorcycle. He would give him that motorcycle because he sees benefit and comfort to himself from doing that. D, Nawab threatens to quit. If Haroni doesn't agree, no, Nawab doesn't threaten to quit if he doesn't get a motorcycle. So that would just be incorrect. You're not interpreting the text correctly if you answered D. All right, as far as, okay, I already got it there. So now we got question 8. Question 8 is evidence. So I'm going to look for where we talk about him only making decisions if it comforts him. So I'm going to go take a look for that. I think that was right around late 60s, I believe, right here. Okay, I highlighted this and I talked about it giving character insight into Harani. I'm going to use a blue pen just so you can see this better real quick. Let me switch over. Okay, it's right here. Okay, you see that that's in blue. That's the evidence I want to use there. Okay, he didn't particularly care one way or the other except that it touched on his comfort, a matter of great interest to him. So that's showing that he really only cares about his comfort. We see that's lines 66 through 68. So that's the answer choice I'm going to look for down here. I'm going to switch over to my other pen, and I see that I have that as answer B. Okay, so B will be my answer for number 8. Because that shows us how he only makes decisions if it benefits him and his comfort. So answer choice B for number 8. Now we got question 9. The passage states farm managers react to Nawab receiving his motorcycle with, well, that's going to be discussed. We actually say that explicitly, and I'll go ahead and show you where that is. Okay, and if you weren't sure what it is, you'd want to go back to the text, find where we talk about farm managers. You'll notice I highlighted this because it gave us insight into the farm managers. We see much to the disgust of the farm managers. I'll switch over to blue so you can see that better. Okay, we have much to the disgust of the farm managers. So the farm managers are disgusted with Nawab receiving a brand new motorcycle, a Honda 70. Okay, so we know that 9 there is going to have to be a disgust. Okay, not happiness, not envy, and not indifference, because we explicitly say that it is disgust that they react with. All right, according to the passage, what does Nawab consider to be the best result of getting the motorcycle? Well, I highlighted this one as well. That's him getting to spend more time with his wife. I'll go ahead and show you that real quick. We see that right here, okay? Notice how me highlighting, or in your case, you'll be underlining since you can't use a highlighter, me highlighting things like best of all, or if it said only one, or worst of, anything like that that really exclusively says one thing is the best or the worst or the most important or the least important. I always pay attention to that because that usually is important in the text. In this case, we're saying that the best of all of receiving that motorcycle is he can spend every night with his wife. So being able to spend more time with his wife there would be our answer for number, I think it was 10 we were on. Yep. Okay, so that's going to be, let me look at my choices. Not A. A says people starting to call him uncle. That's wrong. B. Expanding his business. That's wrong. C. Educating his daughters. No. D. Spending more time with his wife. Yes, D is our correct answer for 10. All right, so as far as, I forgot to do question types for 8 through 10. I'll quickly do that. 8 is going to be an evidence question type, right? We're just providing evidence for a claim. Number 9 is a little detail question, right? We saw that we had to go back, find that little detail of those farm managers reacting in disgust. So that one's just going to be a little detail question for 9. 10, according to the passage, what does Nawab consider to be the best result of getting a motorcycle? Once again, that's also a little detail question. Okay, just asking us to go back, find what he considers the best result. That's just kind of reading comprehension. If you didn't remember that, you could just go back and find it. All right, so I believe that covers everything that we wanted to cover with this passage today. We've got all our question types down, all our answers down. Quick double check, make sure we've got every question answered. Looks like we do. All right, so as always, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. There'll be a donation link in the description if the video is helpful. It'll be in the description when it's up and running. Any private SAT tutoring I'm doing will be linked in the description. Any private college admissions consulting I'm doing will be linked in the description. As always, make sure to have a great day. Like, share, and subscribe.